Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Brookline Booksmith's author event series. My name is Silas. A few housekeeping notes, please be sure to keep your phones on silent. If you haven't picked up a pre-ordered book, you can do so in the back there after the event. We also have books for sale, and there will be time for a Q&A, so please get your questions ready. We're lucky to be here tonight to enjoy a reading of Writrix Volume One, Coloring with Words, from 7 of the contributors and the editor, Leslie Berliant.
Always have to move the microphone down. Thank you so much for being here. We're really excited. This is our first reading around this book. It just came out about 2 months ago, or a month ago, actually. Time flies. It is the work, the love child of 16 really brave women authors who dared to share their voices with the world. And I'm very honored to have had the opportunity to be the editor and to bring these folks together. My name is Leslie Berliant. I teach writing classes. I run Writrix salons online all year long, where you get to hear readings like this and work like this. It's a combination of poetry, prose, personal essay, fiction, nonfiction, and what it all has in common is that it really captures the depth and the breadth of the human experience. So I'm going to let the work speak for itself, and let my first writer, Jen Fanning, kick us off.
Good evening, I'm Jen Fanning, and I'm going to be reading an excerpt from Alice Grows Up. See, she knew it was crucial to her recovery that his interest was more than skin, lips, and hips deep. Deeper than deep. At the minimum, as in soul-level depth. She pondered, searching for evidence that he wondered about her soul and her soul's future, regardless of her tattered, splattered soul's past. The eyes are the windows to the soul. She loved that saying, that image. And it was at times like these that she would stare into her own eyes at the person in the mirror, contemplating her infinite depth, her reflection, and therein her finiteness. The all-at-onceness of life was her jam, after all. And like Alice, very, very small and very, very large, juxtaposed, she'd think, how do I get through the looking glass? And like the fuzzy caterpillar smoking a hookah, she asked herself, no, really, who am I? She meticulously, quizzically, concisely, consciously, cautiously questioned, meditating and conjecturing, even speculating on her who-ness, and wondered if he wondered about the beauty, about her beauty at that deeper than skin deep, soul level, wondering way. Down, down, down in her thoughts she fell. Down the seemingly bottomless rabbit hole pit she fell. And not the Bugs Bunny or Mad Hatter rabbit hole pit. No, more like the dirt-lined, earthy, musty, real rabbit hole pit. Into the pit of life and love she fell, deep down into her own dark brown eyes looking back from the other side, all while imagining his blue-green eyes staring into her, landing there on her, seeking her, choosing her, and soulfully seeing her, wanting to be with her. Everyone had told her, you've got to become love to attract love. That felt like how you do one thing is how you do everything. And that was just 2D for her 5D and beyond quantum physics way of seeing, doing, and being in this life and in love. She returned to her thoughts, to the windows of the soul, and love, and recovery, and this soul's journey, as in the Holy Grail quest journey. And being prone to curiosity, of course she asked herself, had she truly always been on a fool's errand, on her soul's journey to come home, to come to love, to find and seek, as opposed to hide and seek? After all sickness is homesickness, she thought, as all healing requires some form or another of coming home to self. She had run away from home more than once, in both figurative and literal ways throughout her life, and she didn't want this to be that again. She was too old to sleep on cardboard boxes under bridges in the rain, in the cold, on the streets of San Francisco, Detroit, or DC, or anywhere else ever again. She was too old to fall for nothing ever again. She was too old to live like young people anymore. So what she wanted to know now was this journey with him going to bring her closer to or further from home? See, she was on purpose in living her soul's mandate in this lifetime, and that was that. If all her years of playing with red queens and having tea with mad hatters, dancing with tweedledees and dumbs, reciting poems about walruses and oysters cuckoo-cuckooing had taught her anything, the most blatant lesson was that mindlessly following the labels, drink me, eat me, kiss me, help me, love on me, had never led her to where she knew she was meant to be, doing and being what her soul arrived here for, love. And she sensed from his frequent tears of years lost with his ex-wife that he was seeking her to heal him and not quite yet able to see her for her wild magnificence and beauty. So she laid back, touched herself all over, and down, down, down she went into her thoughts, and beyond to the thoughts of her soul. She pontificated with her hands on the exact nature of his courting her, his dating her, and his desires for her. And then she placed her attention on his soul and his soul's desires, and was able to see they were unrelated to her. And it became clear that his desire had absolutely nothing to do with her and everything to do with him. The yearning in his pants was indeed a yearning, just not a yearning about or for her. She then placed her attention on her desires, her rights, her dreams, and she knew without a shadow of a doubt that knowing she was deeply cared for and treasured, as in for the ride of a lifetime, elation and joy, like an intellectual desirous hunger for her, was the bare minimum. And that regular old, I think maybe he likes me, was now a deal breaker. She waved as his train left the station. She still thinks about his soul from time to time and hopes he finds all he seeks on his journey in this lifetime. Till then, she nestles in spines of books and piles of pillows where she scribbles her soul's thoughts onto paper, along with engaging in her magical friendships all over the world. She immerses herself in continual, limitless possibility, knowing her soul's hunger for love and sweetness, and deeper than deep conversations and giggles await her in this lifetime, in this embodiment, and that's that.
Hello, my name is Linder, and I've got two short pieces. Mandate for iconic image making. Capture the essence. Show, don't tell. Send a message. Make you look. Make you think. Make you feel. stop time, reveal truth, elevate the subject, share vulnerability, like estranged fathers and children reconciling after time passed, like the rock star in the making still exploring personas, like the startup team that must lead with confidence even when they feel none, like a woman of a certain age when she becomes aware of that phrase, like me on the other side of the lens, doing research and shifting the focus. My power now rests on being less visible, hiding in sight. I hide behind hair and makeup, bad judgment, and good humor. Like saying yes when I mean maybe, or maybe when I mean no. I make it easy to see you, elevate you, and celebrate you. What turns off inside when the camera turns on me? When the camera turns me on and I'm not grasping it, it's in the eye of the beholder and I want to be held. Tease me, soothe me, love me, look through that lens, build trust, dialogue, create intimacy, connect, essentials in the act of seeing. Thank you. The walk. I'm walking my heart at the end of a thread with the sun on the rise, eager to meet the street. Glimmer of light, golden twists, yearning to flash a pulse through midday shadows. The catch, as always, work. Words that burn through ages, love and work. Love arrived as a verb and got attached. My first heart was my work heart. The rhythm of art in the heart broke on a landing in the village at the top of the stairs. A silent break developing overnight, moving through mottled blue shag, slow and soft in its muffled state. When I found my heart again, it appeared through a rift in time, space, and social media. The sensation was small at first and doubled twice, pure and sweet with a cling of honey. I almost lost the pulse last fall, a gasp from exposure or lack of oxygen. But the beat by beat by beat pulled through. Soon we will share an evening lesson and walk on rainy pavement. Later you will rest by my desk as I look through letters and pixels, the rhythms of apps and imagination. Before bed, I will gently toss the world through a maze, and my heart will chase it over and over. I don't know how to thrive in seasons so steeped in industry, deaf to a presence that whispers and stirs. But insight works with what it sees. Transcendence is walking to the beat, on the streets, in the village, eager to be anywhere my heart is happy.
Hello, I'm Rochelle Seltzer. I'm reading an excerpt from my story, Our Yellow Paintbrush. On our occasional transatlantic calls, my mother would tell me about the boeuf bourguignon she had made that week, or describe a clafoutis she had mastered, having ordered one that dazzled her senses on a trip to the countryside. Each time my parents invited friends and family to share a leisurely evening around the table, she had an opportunity to plan a wonderful meal, shop for ingredients en route claire, and spent hours in her little kitchen making magic. She gave me a love and appreciation for fine food, though in the midst of my busy life, I rarely devote time to cooking more than simple meals. Unlike me, my mother was rarely happier than when she cooked. Yes, the small apartment was lived in and loved for all the years my parents came, savoring 6 to 8 weeks here each spring and fall. And now, my husband and I had a precious month to settle in. We had spent a week at a time here in the past, enjoying the flat as a comfy place to use as a base for daily explorations. This time, we were living here. In the living room, I felt the pull to slowly and lovingly open drawers and scan bookshelves. The bookcase is crammed with dozens of Michelin guides and travel books about cities all over France and all over Europe where they ventured on excursions. Art books, and museum catalogs are nestled with novels and memoirs. In the drawers below, my mother's files are just as she left them. They're perfectly organized, filled with names and addresses of restaurants and notes about what they loved at each one. She recorded museum visits and exhibitions they saw, and the relatives or friends they shared those visits with. It's easy to get lost in the memories she captured. And her art is on the walls at every turn. Small prints, drawings, evocative pen and ink sketches of mountainous and seaside landscapes that she made while traveling, and delicate watercolors of clustered dishes and vases she had set up for still lifes. These small pieces are simply framed, grouped in charming vignettes, unlike the more ambitious, and she thought impressive, art that she had made in college, all handsomely framed and hung prominently in their house. One of my intentions for our month in the apartment was to paint. Growing up with an artist mother, my relationship to my own creativity was complicated. I had shut down creatively as a young child, losing my nerve bit by bit each time my mother, who aimed for perfection in everything she did, urged me to try again and draw that house, or horse, or flower better. She told me my little drawings could include more detail, or I could use prettier colors, or that they could be neater. Daring to venture into painting just a few years ago, I've met myself in extraordinary ways. The biggest hurdle I faced was allowing myself to feel free in front of a canvas and trust myself, a possibility that had long terrified me. This time in Paris, I was determined to make time to paint more frequently than at home, even as I continued my work and intended to explore the city. And with the opportunity came challenges. I was only able to bring a tiny set of acrylics, a miniature pad of palette paper, and small sheets of paper meant for printmaking with me to Paris. Without the fully outfitted studio and supplies I enjoyed at home, I'd experiment and try new things on a small scale. I would play. But I was missing brushes. My ample array of brushes at home were inaccessible due to repair work that was underway as we packed for our trip. It didn't feel like a problem. After all, Paris is a city for painters. I'd find an art supply store and be all set. When we visited a papeterie near us on our first outing, we found a reasonable selection of art supplies, but the small, soft, tapered brushes they had were too petite and delicate for what I had in mind. So we returned to the flat, and I found myself again exploring inside of drawers and cabinets. I opened a large, low file drawer in the bookcase, crammed with Ziploc bags, each labeled in my mother's small, careful script. As I pawed deeper into the drawer, I found a small bag with a watercolor set inside. Also in the bag was a white plastic palette, a brush that was a bit larger and certainly bulkier than those that come inside of metal watercolor boxes, and some small pencil sketches. A folded sheet of curiously thick black clear plastic sat at the bottom of the drawer. The brush with the bright yellow handle called to me. The bristles were not soft, as one would usually use to paint with watercolors. They were stiff and cut straight across, unlike the typical slim watercolor brushes that I associated with the kinds of small, subtle paintings my mother made. The brush was not new or untouched. She had certainly painted with it. But it was hard to envision her using that coarse brush, as the forms in all of her watercolors were smooth and soft. They would be unattainable with the wide, stiff bristles of the yellow brush. Perhaps she had merely dabbled with the brush and decided not to use it again. This is the
And that is the cover of the book.
And that is the cover.
And it all comes full circle. Thank you, Rochelle.
Hello, I'm Evie Edman, and I'm going to read a piece from a story I wrote called The Final Hunt. Karen's brothers are still wrestling and rolling all over the floor, giggling and making a mess of the living room furniture. She finished her snacks and went in and sat down on the wooden rocking chair with the ornate, oversized metal fasteners on either side of the arms. It was her favorite chair. She loved to think of her and Mommy rocking together in the evening before bedtime. She turned her gaze to the boys, just in time to see Reed get on top of Dwayne's belly, pushing his head down hard into the wooden floor with a thud. Dwayne yelled, "Ouch, you moron! I'm going to kill you now." He roughly pushed Reed off of his body, saying, "This isn't playtime anymore, you sissy." Dwayne leaped over to the gun rack next to the front door. He could hear Dad's voice telling him, "Never touch the guns," as his hands quickly pulled down Spud's trophy rifle, the Marlin 30-30, passed down from Grandpa after he died last year. "Dad's going to give me this gun," he says softly, facing the rack. "I deserve to at least hold it and see if I even want it," he said in his man's voice, deep and low. He'd practice in his bed under the covers late at night. Holding the long rifle in his hands, he felt the coolness of a dark blue steel. It was sleek and beautiful, just how he thought a magic wand would feel. His heart fluttered, his throat restricted, taking his breath away. He began panting like a black dog in the hot sun on a summer's day. He felt like Lewis Crawford's son, Mark, in his favorite TV show, The Rifleman. There he was, helping his dad to make family fights fair again, defending those that can't defend themselves. His penis began to tingle, stiffening up against his jeans. He moved the rifle up into his body and snug against his right shoulder. His tingling sensation took over, starting from his feet, bubbling through his chest to the top of his head. He felt like he was being chased. He couldn't run. Paralyzed, he could see their mouths moving, but couldn't hear his brother and sister screaming, "Put down the gun!" Looking through the scope, he aimed it at his little brother's heart. "I'm telling Dad, Dwayne." Reed's small frame leaped out of the way. He ran around to his brother's side to grab the gun away. Dwayne lurched forward, struggling from Reed's grip. The loud explosion was deafening. All Dwayne could hear was his heartbeat ringing in his ears. Ba-boom, ba-boom, ba-boom. In his peripheral vision, he saw his little sister, Karen in slow motion, folding over the rocking chair, falling onto the floor. The chair was still rocking. Dwayne kept the scope to the right eye firmly, thinking of Grandpa's grovelly voice saying, "Just in case the animal is only stunned from the bullet skimming its body, son. That's what happened. I skimmed her. She'll get up," he murmured, as he stood waiting, watching. He kept saying to himself, "She's okay. She's just faking it." Karen's empty chair seemed to be rocking faster and faster, moving close to her as she lay on the floor. His vision was blurred with tears as he blinked and squinted. "Come on, Karen, get up!" He screamed, his voice cracking and breaking. With his heart throbbing, his body shaking uncontrollably, he dropped the gun to the floor. Dwayne fell to his knees, looking away from his baby sister, lying in a pool of dark burgundy blood on the shiny wood floor, the puddle growing around her head as the liquid poured from her mouth. He slowly picked the rifle back up, and with the same tremble of power this wand gave him, he put the barrel to his heart, fumbling to pull the trigger, but his hands could barely reach it. Running to him, Reed lurched into him, pushing the gun from his grip. They fell to the floor together. Their bodies became one, wrapped in each other's arms, rolling, rocking. They lay and wept tears, spit, and snot uncontrolled, calling out in unison, "God, please help us. Please, please, please bring Karen back, dear God. Please, God, please, God. We need you. We need our sister back." Thank you.
Corinna Raznikov, and I'm going to be reading an excerpt from Why I Stopped Being a Wedding Photographer, or How I Started to Listen to the Universe. The year after I won Boston Magazine's Best of Boston was the year I completely fell apart. It was also the year I discovered the universe was speaking to me. Before then, I did not think of myself as a particularly spiritual person. I described myself as culturally Jewish, heavy on the ish, but my mother was an avowed atheist. I'm actually a humanist, my mother said, while taking a break from spreading compost over our Northern Californian garden. She pulled her long black hair into a ponytail. She had been a child of the 60s and was a natural-born rebel. We believe in science and nature. We celebrated holidays only if they were fun. We celebrated Hanukkah, but Passover was out, not fun enough. Before we lit the candles, we would scurry to find something, anything to cover our heads. A napkin, a placemat. We would sing the prayer, but the meaning was a mystery to me. We lit the candles every year until I was 16, when my mother announced Hanukkah wasn't fun anymore. This was after I returned from a teen tour to Israel. My Aunt Barbara had encouraged me to enter a contest where I was to write an essay about wanting to reconnect with my Jewish roots. That summer, while tucking a note to my great-grandmother Yetta into the rough limestone Wailing Wall in Jerusalem, I felt a click in my heart that expanded out in ripples across my body. Tears came to my eyes. I felt mysteriously connected to everyone and the whole universe. When I returned and told my mother of my experiences and hinted that I was newly interested in Judaism, she was not amused. "Not in our house, kid," she said. We never practiced Hanukkah again. Despite my teenage flirtation with religion, I carried on as an agnostic for 30 years without any kind of overt spirituality. Still, as a wedding photographer, I spent plenty of my weekends in churches and synagogues. The turning point of my career came at a wedding in Palm Beach, next door to Mar-a-Lago. After I won the Best of Boston award, my status increased, and people who wanted the best were calling me, including a glamorous editor of a New York fashion magazine. I went to Florida along with 400 guests. The rain poured for 3 days. At midnight, there was a tiny break in the downpour, and the mechanical roof parted like the Red Sea, so the guests could dance drunkenly under the stars. A sweaty man in a white shirt, transparent with perspiration and open to his waist, danced up to me. "Take a picture of this," he said, and he held his elbow up to the ceiling. Sadly, this was not the first time that a drunken man had exposed his sweat-stained armpit to me and demanded that I take a photograph. When you are the only sober person at a wedding reception, drunken groomsmen also think it is hilarious to grind on you. I pointed the camera at him, clicking the flash button without taking a picture. When drunk men grabbed at my camera, "Hey, can I take a picture of you?" I clicked the same tiny button repeatedly to blind them. I stared up through the open roof to the stars. I wish a lightning bolt would strike me dead, so this would be over, is what I heard. But when I looked around, I was the only person there. I had said it out loud. Leah, my second photographer, hadn't heard me either. She was too busy pulling on my sweat-soaked black blazer. "The coordinator just told me that the after party is about to begin," she said, "and that there are live monkeys under the tent." "Wild monkeys?" I asked. I pictured the flying monkeys from The Wizard of Oz. Perhaps one would alight on Armpit Man and carry him away. "No, trained monkeys to entertain the guests," Leah said, adding, "I don't believe in monkeys at weddings." No one believes in monkeys at weddings, I said. The coordinator hustled us from the club to the attached invisible tent where sad little capuchin and marmoset monkeys sat in a tropical-themed tableau. The black and white checkerboard floor lit with horrid purples and yellows. The bride changed now from her Carolina Herrera gown to a chic-white trapeze mini dress, fed a marmoset a peanut for the camera. Click. Finally, back home in Massachusetts, I downloaded files and scrolled on Facebook, exhausted, overworked. I ached everywhere. My knees were ruined from 20 years of squatting behind pews. A photographer friend of mine posted that she was going to the Marian Yoga Loft for an angel workshop. A day later, I walked up 2 flights of stairs to a tiny room with a vaulted ceiling, plain walls, like a tiny church. Elka, the owner of the yoga studio, greeted me and introduced me to Vanessa, a grasshopper-thin woman with huge eyes. We sat in a circle on the floor. Vanessa had a printout of all the angels and what you could pray to them for. Metatron was for computers and technology. Gabriel was for writing. The idea of praying to the ethers felt rebellious and slightly delicious. Thank you.
Hello. Hi, I'm Anna Donofrio, and I shall be reading from the Anna Epiphany. During my dinner at Marea, even before and after, I kept wondering why I need to have the best caviars, why I need to have white truffles, why I need to have the most expensive, tastiest, healthiest foods. It feels like part of the eating disorder, or it must have some deeper meaning than I understand. I was plagued by it and wanted to know if it's okay. Am I being real? A therapist friend once said to me, "You find so much joy and pleasure in life. Everything is like a discovery for you. It's never about impressing others." That seemed on point to me. Still, I asked her, "How do you know?" "I've known you for 35 years, my friend, and I've watched you. When I was bulimic and anorectic, I ate crap, shit, horrible foods, pounds of cookies out of supermarket packaging, New York cheesecake by the box, fried clams, $2.99, all you can eat at Howard Johnson's, disgusting amounts of food. I could hardly breathe, walk. I blew up, waddled like a 9-month pregnant woman, could barely get to the toilet. I threw the garbage evidence outside the car window while driving. Desperate acts. I ate anything I could get my hands on, particularly if I didn't have to pay for it. It's quite an expensive habit to have an eating disorder if you end up needing to purge and stuff yourself 4 or 5 times a day, as I did. My throat bled. My therapist did everything in her power to keep me out of the hospital. At the beginning, she allowed me to call her at home in between our twice-weekly in-person sessions. She was a young psychiatrist, 5 years older than I was. I would have thought she was at least 10 years older if I had given it any thought. She was tall, thin, attractive, Jewish. She was connected with Yale. She cared about fashion. She cared about me. I was getting a divorce, and I belonged to a group for single women at Yale. I worked as an administrative assistant at the School of Music. I abandoned my father's funeral business as a funeral director, along with my first husband, just 8 months after the wedding of the century. I rented one room in the back of a 4-family Victorian home, with windows starting at 5 feet 5 inches from the floor. They allowed light in, but I could not see out. And I bought myself a banged-up 1965 Pontiac for $65 at auction, the beginning of my new life. There was a woman, her name was clear. She was Jewish and a loving woman. They were all loving to me, all older than I was, enough older to be my mom. Claire in particular knew about my bulimia and about my stuffing myself with pounds of cheap crap. She tried desperately to encourage me to eat the best foods, good, healthy foods. I couldn't. It wasn't clear to me at the time why I couldn't. Now I know it was incongruous with what I was feeling and needing. I was unconsciously destroying myself. Seems like I may be circling back to my healthy primary years, before I was 5, when I was being nurtured by my mom. I don't remember her food. I don't remember her cooking. I don't remember her being happy, except when she was dressed in a ball gown, looking beautiful and happy, frolicking with their friends at our home before they left for the ball. Thank goddess for photos that show a smiling, beautiful, fashionable, stunning woman. Sadly, there are also too many photos of her decline. I hate those photos. In one photo, she is sitting on a Victorian wing chair in our grand living room with 10-foot-high ceilings framed in Greek Revival Turner moldings. I'm 8 years old, sitting on the armchair. She looks so stiff. Her legs and arms look like sticks. Her body frozen in an unnatural position. Her mouth is slightly open, seemingly fixed in pain, and she is wearing bifocals. Her hair is in a chignon. She's wearing a nondescript dress. My whole body is in pain when I see those photos. I feel pain, shame, anger, sadness. It was terrifying to see my mom slowly deteriorate when I was a child with no one explaining what was happening. She had multiple sclerosis. Most of my life, I thought she was bedridden for at least 5 years. When I said that to my dad many years ago before he died, he said it was 1 year. I guess he would know since he fed her homemade pureed table food, changed her menstruating sheets, dealt with the bedpan, everything that goes with taking care of an invalid. And it was all with the assistance of my sister, Marie, who was 12 years old, while I stood by and watched. Marie suffered the rest of her life in and out of mental institutions. My dad's brother owned a nursing home, but Dad chose to keep Mom home. She started to fall when I was in kindergarten. By the time I was in 3rd grade, she was bedridden. I would come home from school then, suffering with horrific headaches. I would try crying myself to sleep since there was no medication I could take to make it go away. I always felt better after I cried, and it usually made me sleepy. But I couldn't always cry. When crying and sleeping didn't work, Grandma offered me a solution. Vomit, Anna, you'll feel better. She would say, just put your finger down your throat. It worked. I always felt better after purging. 10 years later, I would revert to Grandma's vomit training, but this time not for headaches. Thank you.
Why this is such a unique and special group of writers. I'm going to read an excerpt from a piece called The Black Book. My name is Leslie Berliant. Trouble. You're trouble, she said, scanning me like the fried shrimp on the buffet at Golden Corral. You regret it before you even put it on your plate. I questioned my choice of Johnny Cash Black. Less a choice than a necessity. Sure, I had 20 grand in my pocket, but that's about all I had. I'd never really understood the word empty before. I thought it was a temporary condition, like being out of food or out of cash or out of gas. But this empty wasn't temporary. True empty is when there's nothing to fill and nothing to fill it with. It's blank. I threw down a $5 bill, not enough to be interesting, I told her with all sincerity, and walked out. I missed the little black book. Back in the before times, I would have taken it out right there at the bar with a pen, one with a click top. Those were my favorite to pilfer from the grocery store checkout or bank window, and written down what she said. I would have added something about the floor feeling sticky and the bar too, tacky, like wet Elmer's glue, the kind kids like to roll between their fingers during arts and crafts. It's weird, but less gross than kids who pick their noses and play with their own snot. But now the book was gone, and I wondered if it had been worth it to let the fight go. 20 grand and a producer credit on the DVD version of a theatrical flop of My Stolen Life. All those years in the Black Book, the diligent chronicling of every goddamn thing that happened that was the least bit interesting, and now it was gone. And told so poorly, and worth so little. I tried not to take it personally, to remember that they told it all wrong, but still, it was my life up there and nobody wanted to see it. Boring from the first credit to the last, one critic said. Who thought this was a movie worth making, another asked. Save yourself the $12 and spend 2 hours with the dullest person you know. I reminded myself it wasn't my movie, it wasn't even my story. That story was stolen from me, but it still stung. If I'm being honest, more than the lies stung and the stealing the book stung and the betrayal stung, the utter disinterest in my life, that hurt worse. But you can't sue a bunch of people for hating a movie, so I sued my therapist instead. Well, I guess that was another big lie. Joel wasn't really a therapist, but after 5 years of believing he was, telling him things like he was, paying him like he was, telling him about the little black book like he was, it's hard to let go of calling him my therapist. Even if in retrospect, telling me to continue to write it all down in the little black book was just self-serving and not the best advice, even so, habits die hard. I went to Joel in the first place because of the habit of the black book. Habit is the wrong word. I guess it was a compulsion. Even that makes it sound like I had control over the thing. I didn't. And that was starting to get in my way. It made everything much more time-consuming to have to write it all down. It was hard to be productive at work. So much time spent recounting what had just happened in the little black book. Dating, well, forget it. Restaurants and time to talk was just impossible. Not just the weird lags in conversation to get it all in the book, but taking out the book itself was a deal breaker for most women. I confided in Joel that the book was getting in the way, but that I couldn't live without it. I mean, literally. I was pretty sure when the words ran out, that would be it for me. See, I had no memories of before the book, and no family, at least not that I know of, to tell me about me before the book. There was nothing, and then there was the book. And for every single thing that happened to me, it had my response right in there. Like my life had been scripted. Before there were the words, there was just a blank page. Joel was the one who told me to keep writing the book. He coached me to tell people that I was working on a screenplay, so I kept the book with me to write down ideas when they came to me, and they just came to me a lot. Like Boswell and Johnson, if I was both Boswell and Johnson, someone said to me once. I wrote that down along with my response. Good one. I think about it now. I was like a snake swallowing my own tail. But now that the book is gone, I'm like a shedded snakeskin, dry and decaying. Soon, I suppose, I will be dust. People ask about your past all the time. It seems irrelevant to me since it's done and gone, but they want to know where you grew up and how you grew up. They think it gives them some insight into who you are now. I could have just shown them the book for insight, but Joel said that was a bad idea. That people would find it odd to hand it over as like, here, get to know me gesture. I heard about these two women once who wanted to be friends, but both were very busy with school and work, so they made tapes for one another, telling all of their most important stories. They gamed the friendship system. I brought that up to Joel, but he said this wasn't the same and encouraged me to keep the contents of the book private. He helped me come up with a story about my past. It involved an orphanage in Anchorage. He told me the chances of me meeting someone in Los Angeles who was also an orphan from Anchorage was pretty slim. So that was my story, an orphanage in Anchorage run by very kind nuns. Joel and I both felt the mean nun thing had been overdone. Why not mix it up and make them nice for once? I guess him encouraging me to lie should tip me off that something about him wasn't on the up and up. But it worked. People usually didn't ask much more about the orphanage because usually they just wanted to know about Anchorage. How cold did it get? Did I eat whale blubber? And had I ever seen a polar bear? I did a lot of research on Anchorage, and I've been thinking about spending some of my 20 grand to go there. But everything is so wide open right now. I might go to Cancun instead. So that was a little taste of what's in the book. Most of these were excerpts of longer pieces. And I hope that you'll buy it, read it, enjoy it. It's a real act of bravery, whether you are a very accomplished writer or a new writer, to put your thoughts and ideas onto a page and put them out into the world. And I'm so proud of these writers for showing up in that way in the world. And as you can see, some of these are brand new, never been published before. Some of these are writers who've been published before, and I defy you to tell the difference, because all of them brought their whole selves to the stories and the essays and the poems that they shared. So we'd love to open it up to questions if you have any. We're happy to sign books. I can talk a little bit about the process if people are interested, or if you have questions for specific writers about their pieces, I'm sure they'd be happy to answer them. Yeah? Yeah, how it all started. Yeah, thank you for that question. So I teach writing classes for women. I teach classes on Zoom, so I've had people from all over the world join these classes. And we run retreats. In fact, we're just all coming off a weekend writers retreat. And I had an idea that I've been lucky enough to be in several anthologies as a writer. And I had this idea as I was listening to these incredible women come up with these stories in a matter of weeks, that I wanted to put together an anthology that was really not so much thematic, which is typical of an anthology, you know, stories about motherhood, stories about parenting, stories about work, but something that was a little bit broader, and that the theme was really about depth and what I would call writing from the deep voice. And I believe that no matter what kind of writing you're doing, whether it's personal essay or fiction or poetry or a blog post or a Facebook post, that you have the opportunity to share something that is true, even if it's not, that is truth, even if it is not 100% true. That we, as humans, want to see ourselves reflected in characters. We talked about this a lot this weekend, how the importance of writing is not just for the writer to share what's in their head and in their mind, but it's for us as consumers of the written world to be able to see ourselves in all our flawed humanity in characters that we fall in love with, because it gives us permission to fall in love with our own flaws. And so this is volume 1, and there will be more volumes to come. And it's really, folks had a chance to create pieces of work in the context of classes and retreats, and then go off and work on them on their own and come back, and we had a whole editing process. And the result was this first volume. Thank you. Any other questions? Sure, great.
I'm a good writer, but I'm not a formal writer, and people always tell me you should be writing books. So I have a couple of ideas in my head, not time to do it now, but I've been in a journal. So, and I'm a creative person, so how would someone, coming from where I am, start to figure out what I or someone else would want to work on? What is that?
So,
I was like, I could answer that question.
Yeah.
Do you want to answer
yeah.
that, Anna? I think you should sign up for one of Leslie's writing classes. Yeah.
That's why I came here. I was like,
Yeah, because I also, I had written a book over COVID. I'd written a 100,000 word book over COVID, and then I read it over and I was like, okay, this is not working at all. Okay. And then I talked to Leslie about it and said, okay, is this where I'm gonna have to do the 10,000 hours Malcolm Gladwell thing, and maybe by the time I'm 70 I'm gonna be a good writer? And she said, no, it's actually, I think it's faster than you think. I think it's some tweaks and some tools, and I think you should work with me. And I was like, you're right, and I did, and it was awesome.
so that original
No, she's really helped me find my voice, and I'm now writing essays and short stories, and I was just trying to like make it happen before, and I was forcing it, and now I feel like, oh, I'm ready to write more authentic things. So she's just a really wise, compassionate guide.
You know, I would add to that. So one of my teachers who I was really lucky to have the opportunity to do some workshops with was Kurt Vonnegut, the writer. And I will say, he's one of my favorite authors. He was not one of my favorite teachers, but he did say something that always stuck with me, which is, when I sold cars, I was a car salesman. And when I wrote, I was a writer. You are all, I guarantee, you're all writers. You all write in some form or another. It's not some super magic sauce, right? We wait for inspiration, lightning to strike, the perfect moment, the perfect block of time. I'm gonna go sit, it's the media image. Going to sit for a month in a cabin in the woods with no distractions, and all I'm gonna do is write, and that's how you're a writer. But the reality is our modern lives, for most of us, don't allow that. And it's amazing what you can do in 15 minutes, in an hour, in a weekly class, in a weekend workshop. Some of these pieces, came out of, like, we had some extra time during class, and I was like, write. 30 minutes. So a lot of it is about not waiting for the perfect environment, but if you feel the pull to bring your thoughts, ideas, voice, and truth to the page, you can find community to support you in that. And it doesn't have to look like I went to a cabin in the woods for a month. Or I went to a writing workshop where they told me, I had to do X, Y, and Z. Right? If you feel like you're being diminished as a writer, that's not the right workshop for you. Right? It's like about finding that space that elevates you, that focuses on what works in your writing, what pulls you in, what you want to hear more about, where you could enhance what you're saying. I often tell this story of like reading a piece that I worked really hard on this week going, that's boring. And I was like, I don't know what to do with that.
Thank you. Thank you all.
So it's about finding the right community for you to support you in the writing.
Yeah.
And I hope you will join us. Anybody else or any other questions? But we'll be happy to sign books if people want, or we can talk more one-on-one if you have questions for specific writers about their pieces. But thank you all so much for coming. This is a big deal for us, so we really appreciate the support. It means a lot.